Hello, and welcome to the ITPro Podcast. I'm Jay McCallion.
And I'm Adam Shepherd.
And this week we're talking about guide dogs. Now, while this may seem a bit off topic for a technology podcast, UK charity Guide Dogs for the Blind is just one of the increasing number of organisations using data to improve their operations.
Founded in 1931, Guide Dogs has seen a great deal of change in both society and technology over the course of the past 89 years. With the advent of the internet and widespread use of smartphones in recent decades, it now has the potential to reach even more individuals in the UK than ever before. Indeed, the use of digital services is a cornerstone of its By My Side strategy, which aims to increase the number of people it supports from 200,000 to 500,000 by 2023.
Joining us today to talk about the importance of data in achieving this is Gerard McGovern, CIO of Guide Dogs. Gerard, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So, Gerard, before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit more about your role within Guide Dogs?
So, as CIO, I'm responsible for anything with a plug and anything to do with data. And it's a very broad definition, but ultimately it's about how do we connect people with data, and how do we really use data and systems to help people with sight loss live the life they choose, and how do we help people within the organisation to support that.
So what has your digital strategy looked like until now?
I think if we think more about on the data side, we have been, and I think this is typical of a lot of organisations, we've grown and we've utilised technology as it's become available, and we're very lucky being in the third sector that there are an awful lot of companies out there that do give up their time and their resources to enable us to have the same technology that other companies have with much larger budgets. But I think in line with a lot of other companies and organisations, we've done it piecemeal. So we've identified a piece of technology or a system that's worked for an individual department, and we've built up a collection of an awful lot of pieces of data effectively. And whilst that's great and we've solved individual needs, what we haven't done is looked at it holistically, looked at it as the whole organisation about what is the best way to use that data and gain insights from it. So our strategy is changing. We want to centralise that data, and we want to make sure that once we have all that data in one place, it's much easier to deliver digital services. It's much easier to get insights from that data and ultimately become more efficient at supporting people with sight loss and better at raising money from our donors.
Can you pinpoint, or is there a point in time in particular where you were, as an organisation or as an individual, like, right, okay, we need to make better use of data, we've got this information, how can we make best use of it? Or is it something that kind of evolved naturally?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think we've seen that, so first of all, we couldn't exist without data, and we've been using it in various different forms. I think we've seen over the last few years that it's becoming more and more difficult to create that overall view. If you imagine, we've got our data primarily split between people we help and people who help us, and having that crossover is very difficult because it's two very disparate data sources. So very much in the last 18 months, we've decided they need to be brought together. We need to become better at how we use that data. But it's something that's, as you say, that's evolved over time as well. We've become better with the data we've got, but we realise that to really, really get those insights, we need to centralise that data.
Presumably it's something that's become more difficult over time as well. You know, the increasing number of people who you help, the increasing number of people who donate their money or their time or whatever, the more data you actually have to deal with.
It's certainly a nice problem to have. We're not going to complain that there's more people who are supporting Guide Dogs and helping us, but you're spot on. It creates its own little problems. We have, for instance, nearly 250 million records on communications that we've sent to people, and
wow,
that's a really, really big number. Mm-hmm. And we need to make sure that it's no use just growing that data for data's sake. We need to be able to make the best use of that data.
So on that note, I wonder if you can share a little bit of context around the kind of data points and the kind of data projects that you're working with? You know, I mean, what for an organization like Guide Dogs, is there a difference in how you're using data compared to, say, a bakery or a bank or, you know, whatever?
Well, I certainly hope so. I have no knowledge of bakeries, but I'd imagine our data would be slightly different. I think in terms of Guide Dogs, we either to keep data on people we're helping or people who are helping us. And I think if we look at the people who are helping us, what we want to make sure is that we have a consistent and long-lasting relationship with that person. It's not just about a single donation. It can be, and it's great that people do donate, but we want to maintain that relationship. And we want to look at how can we best serve content and information to people about the work that we're doing. So we try to make sure that we know, within obviously GDPR and sensitive information guidelines, we know as much about someone as they want to tell us, and we can then use that data to really feed really good content to them and really engage with them. And then if we look at the people that we help, we want to make sure that we're doing that in the best possible way, that it's person-centered, that we're not asking someone to tell their story more than once, so that we ensure that data is exactly what is needed to target the best possible support that we can.
And does this data strategy factor into the, for want of a better word, canine side of things at all?
It absolutely does. So we often use the phrase DRM, which a lot of people will know as digital rights management, but we use it to describe dog relationship management. So the canine side is very, very important. We are one of the largest breeders of guide dogs in the world, and there is a very, very strict process in terms of how that happens to ensure that we have the right number of dogs available to help the right number of people at the right time. So yes, a lot of data is person-centered, but you're right, we're called guide dogs. It does relate to the dog as well, and that data is also very, very important. And it's a really good point you raise in terms of the project we're doing at the moment. We have a lot of very good data sitting within our breeding system and our dog behavior management system. What we need is a way of surfacing that data, and that's the bit where we're working with people on, because it's all well and good having that data. You need to be able to use it. Otherwise, it just sitting in a database there's no value there. It's only valuable when you get to use it.
Has the COVID-19 pandemic had any impact on what you're doing? Because a part of me thinks maybe, the other part of me is kind of like, well, data it transcends, doesn't it, global pandemics?
I think for us, it's highlighted the importance of data. I think we always knew it was important, but it really has highlighted it. And we've had to pivot. We've had to still provide that same level of support and care, but provide it digitally, because in a lot of cases, we can't interact with people in the same way that we did. It's becoming better. We know more about the virus, which means we can interact with people with obviously the correct PPE. But having that data and having those digital services available really has enabled us to pivot as an organization. And I think it's something we'll carry on through, because I think instinctively before we would always want to meet up as a first instance, or we'd want to always be physically there. And sometimes that isn't appropriate. And we didn't really have a response to that. Now that we've had to develop through technologies such as Zoom and the digital management of services, it gives more options to the people that we help, and that can only be a good thing.
So can you tell us a bit more about the ways you're using data in relation to the dogs that you breed and care for?
Absolutely. So the life of a guide dog and the total training cost to create that partnership is around about £65,000. So we need to make sure that when we breed dogs, that they have the correct characteristics that make them suitable to be a guide dog. And we have a very established breeding program that tries to do that as much as possible, but effectively we're trying to make hard data points on soft data. And for instance, there's all manner of reasons why a dog may not end up becoming a guide dog. For instance, you sometimes can't untrain the characteristic of chasing a cat, which, if you're a guide dog, really is not a fantastic thing to do. So we are collecting data all the time on dog behavior, on different traits, on how a dog is, and we're also looking at the genomic side of it, because ultimately we want to make sure that if there is a set of markers or there's a genetic sequence, and this is obviously, I'm simplifying this way too much, but essentially if we can earlier identify what creates that perfect guide dog, it just means we can be more efficient in the breeding process. But at the same time, we do have a very, very active dog adoption system as well, because there are, for instance, the guide dog that chases cats makes a wonderful pet. And I know, for instance, that myself and my family are about to adopt a guide dog. So there's pros and cons, but at the same time, we just want to make sure that we do the best we can to make sure our breeding process is the best.
Presumably, there's an element of health as well. I know that when you think of a guide dog, you typically think of a Labrador, but I know that the original first guide dogs were German Shepherds, and both of them need good hip and eye scores, so to make sure that they are healthy around their hips and with their vision. So I would imagine there's an element of that involved as well.
There absolutely is. Hips are another reason, or another element that factors into why a guide dog might not be part of the program. So yes, you're right, that the more data we can have, and it's not an exact science, and this is one of those areas where we really need to look at, we are collecting an awful lot of data, and we need to make sure that we are looking through that data to find those gems, to find those bits where we go, okay, it has this, therefore it leads to this. And as I said, it's not an exact science, and we're getting better at it every day, but we have access to technologies and AI and machine learning that simply 5 years ago we just wouldn't have access to. So the future is very good in that sense.
Well, we're going to take a quick ad break now, but when we come back, we'll be finding out more about guide dogs' data strategy.
See you after the break.
Welcome back. Now, before the break, we touched a little bit on some of the ways in which you're making use of data, but I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about some of your objectives with the new strategy. What are you trying to accomplish?
So first of all, the main objective is centralizing that data, and that's because we have so many disparate systems, and it's then very difficult to gain insights. And I think once we have that data centralized, and very importantly, in a system that we can then use the data in other places. At the moment, we have an old legacy CRM system that keeps the data to itself. It's not even a SQL database. It doesn't allow us to do anything with that data. So once we have that data in a usable place, we can then do all raft digital services. We don't want people to not have access to their data. We want to make it so that if someone wants to log onto our website and change their details, they can do that themselves. They can use their data however they want. And once we have it in a place where it is usable, the number of digital services we can offer just increases exponentially. And the core to that will be creating a single sign-on for all of our digital products. Because at the moment, if you are a volunteer, a donor, a service user, a member of staff, we treat you completely separately, as if we don't know what those relationships are. And by centralizing that data and making it digitally available, we can treat you as one person with many different roles. And I think that's our main aim, because once we have that data there, then we can really start to use it and gain those insights.
Are you looking at data warehousing at all?
We absolutely are, because we will still have, whilst we want to centralize the data, we recognize that they're centralizing in terms of creating a common platform so that data can be accessed, exchanged and used in a common way. But the whole point of that platform is, as an end user, you don't know, or don't need to know, where that data has come from, as long as it's presented in a consistent way. And if we take as an example, we're pursuing Salesforce as our CRM. Salesforce is really, really great, but it is expensive to store, quite rightly, because you want to put your most valuable data in there so you can start mining it and using it to gain those insights. So when we talked about those 250 million email records, we don't need to have all of those in Salesforce. That would not serve any purpose. So we will need to split off and decide different places to store it, but we will do that holistically, coordinated, and looking at data as an organizational asset rather than just an individual department's ownership.
And you've mentioned Salesforce just now. Are you able to tell us any of the other sort of tools that you're looking into or that you have started using?
So Salesforce is the main one. We already have Salesforce, so it wasn't really a decision to start a new platform. It was more reaffirming that we wanted to carry on using Salesforce. So Salesforce powers are, if we split it between dog and human data, Salesforce powers the system that has our dog data on there and some of our volunteer and contact preference data, because Salesforce is very good at doing that. Once we've moved away from our legacy CRM, that will be moved on to Salesforce. There will be then a myriad of other tools that we look at. There is clearly going to be some form of cloud-based database we use, whether that's AWS or Azure, we don't know yet. There will be some middleware, there will be a data warehouse. These are all up for discussion, but I guess in that sense, we're at the early stages, because the primary part is let's get that data off that legacy CRM and then we can start planning forward. And one of the key parts of this is the way we're developing this project is definitely on an agile basis. I don't think you can develop this as a traditional style waterfall project, because you have to do it iteratively. You have to deliver value as soon as possible. So that's very important, but there will be other products we are using. We just haven't decided what those are going to be yet.
Now, you've been working with data consultancy Carruthers and Jackson, co-founded by Caroline Carruthers, who has previously been a guest on this podcast. Can you share what the kind of timeframes are for this project? How long are you envisaging before you reach full kind of rollout, if you like?
It's a really great question, and I think as we are fully embracing the agile way of delivering, we absolutely will be delivering a minimal viable product the middle of next year. We have to do that, and then from that point forward, I think it's more a case of, I don't think there will be an end to this. We already have very established development teams within Guide Dogs who add features to our current systems all the time. They will carry on doing that with effectively the new setup, the new platform we are creating. So I hope in a way there won't ever be an end to this, because our data needs and what we want to do with our data will always be changing. There will always be new products out there. And bringing this back to COVID, if we looked at our roadmap 9 months ago and compare it to now, it's very, very different, and quite rightly so. So I hope it doesn't ever end.
I suppose that's the essence of digital transformation, isn't it? That quite often it's spoken about and written about as if it's you do your digital transformation and then congratulations, you have transformed, rather than it being an ongoing process.
It's a journey, not a destination, right?
Completely agree. And I think there is an element of, there's certain bits if we're doing the journey analogy, there's certain bits you have to have. You've got to have the car, you've got to have the snacks there, all of that stuff. But as time goes on, you're going to pick different music. You might end up taking a little detour here and there, and you might end up going somewhere different. But you need to have those building blocks in place. And I think that's the important part, having those building blocks in place. But then you're correct, it's a journey that has many different destinations and hopefully will never end.
Jane, your car analogy has officially been quite severely one-upped.
Well, I've got to say, I can't express how happy I am that 2 episodes in a row, somebody else has made a car analogy. So I believe that I am 3-0 up to you. So, of the work that you have done so far in this journey, have you seen any results, or what results have you seen, rather?
I think the main one is about setting up the start of this journey. And I think it's very important with all projects of this nature that, first of all, they're not seen as just a technology project, because they absolutely aren't. It is something that is for the organization as a whole. And creating that buy-in, making sure that everyone knows exactly why we're doing this, that is fundamental to any project. And all the projects I've seen where that has not been articulated are the ones that have not gone very well. So we absolutely have the buy-in of everyone in the organization, which is really important. That's not to say this isn't going to be hard work. It is going to be really, really hard work. We are effectively looking at everything we do with data and processes and saying, how can we do this better? But the end result will be fantastic. In terms of results so far, we are very much at the start, but it's very important to say that the best result so far is that everyone is bought into this.
So have there been any surprising insights from your early experiments in data analysis?
I think probably the most surprising has been the amount of data we already have. And it's just a case in certain examples that we're not using it correctly. And that's not to say there isn't challenges in how we get to that point, but it's a much nicer place to start when you already have data. It's much easier to talk to people and show people when you have something you can already show them. We still need to work out exactly what we're going to do, and I think it's very important in the future that we don't keep data unnecessarily and that we distill it down so that we are keeping and using the most important data to give us the best insights. But it's certainly a good place to start, and certainly I've been surprised at the amount of data that we do have.
So what advice would you give to anyone, especially those working in charities or other third sector organisations that are considering undertaking a similar project?
I think fundamentally you need to know what your internal capabilities are and are not. That's probably one of the key things we've learned. And if I look at the progress so far, we have a really, really good data team. We have probably one of the best in the industry, but they've been working on products within departments and not looking at holistically. And that's where bringing in a company like Carruthers and Jackson, where you can sit down and go, okay, how do we look at this not at a department level? What's our overall strategy? How are we going to use this data, not just for marketing, not just for fundraising, but across the whole organization? But to do that, you have to take that first step of going, what skills and resources and capabilities do we have already, and where do we need that help? And no one's going to be perfect. There's nothing wrong with not having those resources in place. It's just making sure that you identify that and then make sure you bring in the correct resources and companies to fill that gap.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you once again to Gerard McGovern, CIO of Guide Dogs, for joining us.
Not a problem, it's been a pleasure.
You can find out more about everything we've spoken about in the show notes and even more on our website, itpro.co.uk. And to find out more about the work that Guide Dogs do, visit guidedogs.org.uk.
You can also follow us on Twitter, where we are at ITPro, as well as on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the ITPro podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you find podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and a review.
We'll be back next week with more insight from the world of IT, but until then, goodbye.
Bye.
The ITPro Podcast is brought to you by the Dennis Podcast Network.